Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Full Potential Show. I'm James Rick, and this is your number one non-boring source for personal development. Today on the line, we have Rick Hanson. He is a neuropsychologist, meditation teacher, and the best-selling author of Buddha's Brain, the practical neuroscience of happiness, love, and wisdom. You're going to find all the free gifts and wealth of wisdom that you're going to learn here at buddhasbrain.com. He's got a lot of great stuff on there. And so there's so many free resources you can find there. Rick, thank you so much for being on today's Full Potential Show.
Total pleasure. I'm going to try not to be boring.
It's okay. It's okay if we're boring. As long as what we're talking about is interesting, we get away with it. You see how that works? All right, so let's dive right in and let's talk. First of all, where did the inspiration behind Buddha's Brain come into play?
I'm a practical guy, been married a long time, got 2 kids, nearly young adults, and a business background too. So in the real world, I think it's so important these days when people feel pushed around by so many things that are so powerful that in at least one corner of their life, they've got some power themselves. And that's the power of what we do inside the 3 pounds of tofu inside the coconut. So what turned me on is to use a combination of both Eastern wisdom and hardcore Western science to give people practical tools. That's what my book is all about. It's a toolbox of practical things regular people can do in daily life based in science to use their mind alone to change their brain for the better, which changes their mind for the better over time.
Now,
that's what got me excited.
What inspired this, Rick? I mean, let's start back. I mean, a little bit about your story. I mean, when you're starting out and you're beginning this journey, what inspired you to say, I'm going to combine this, these Western principles, these Eastern principles, and turn this into Buddha's Brain? Where did it start?
When I was a wee tyke a long time ago, no, seriously, I actually had a deep sense that things could be a lot happier than they really were. I grew up in a fairly nice family, but in my family and also around me in kids' school, and then looking out at all these adults who seemed to be grumpy and stressed and bummed and irritable all day long, I just felt in my heart things could be better. And then as I got older, moved into psychology, I'm a clinical psychologist, and also learned about the brain and was exposed to meditation and Eastern practices, it became clearer and clearer to me that people really needed practical tools that were not airy-fairy, they were not, real woo-woo, but were really grounded, based in science that they could use. I started using them more and more in my own life starting around 10, 15 years ago. This happened at the same time as there's been an explosion of knowledge in science about what's happening inside the brain, the most important and powerful organ in our entire body. And so when that new science came together with my we're going way back into childhood desire to help people be happy in regular life, that's what really came together for me in doing the book.
So what's some of the new science that really is starting to bring it together? What are they realizing that you knew all along, Rick?
Well, I don't know if I knew it all along. I think people have known all along in terms of psychology or spiritual practice what makes a difference. But in a certain way, we've been kind of shooting in the dark because we haven't known what's actually happening inside the black box of the brain. It's sort of like learning how to operate a computer hit and miss, with no pull-down menus and no operating manual and nobody to show you what it can do. You can kind of figure stuff out, but it's really great to have some sense of what's going on inside. So, for example, one of the great findings is that little things gradually change the brain over time for better or worse. For example, people who learn how to drive a taxi in London, at the end of their training have a thicker brain in a part called the hippocampus, which does visual spatial memory. People who meditate develop a thicker brain in parts that control attention and also parts that are involved in both self-awareness and empathy for other people. It's a little bit like working out. Actually, it's a lot like working out. If you do certain kinds of things, you'll build up the muscles that do those things. And when you build up those muscles, then you have more capacity, more function.
And that's an amazing discovery, really. It just validates the idea that the brain is not set from birth. And that was the old model. The brain is this blank slate, and it kind of learns along the way. And I was told you're going to lose brain cells, and then that's it. They don't regenerate. Now they're learning not only do they regenerate, but that they also are recruited for these skill sets that you learn that make you more powerful in whatever it is that you're doing. And so you're saying it could be a taxi cab driver, it could be anything, but whatever you do as a routine, and this is something I'm big on when I talk about full potential, whatever you do as a routine, your brain comes to your aid to strengthen and make you better at it, right?
Yeah, completely, exactly right. And part of the important point here is to appreciate, we evolved starting in effect like a kind of an insect, and then a lizard, and then a little rat, and then a monkey, and then a caveman, a cavewoman, and then modern human brain. As that happened, the brain is really biased toward, passing on gene copies, but Mother Nature could care less about quality of life or full potential, right? And so the brain has what scientists call a negativity bias that causes us to tend to focus on the negative, overreact, and over-remember it, whereas positive experiences, unless they're million-dollar moments, have only these sort of plain vanilla memory systems. That's why I actually have a whole chapter in Buddhist Brain on taking in the good, defeating the bias that makes your brain like Velcro for negative experiences, but Teflon for positive ones, by instead really savor, half a dozen times a day, those little positive experiences for 30 seconds at a time. And in the famous saying from Neuroscience, as neurons fire together, they wire together. So you want to get a lot of neurons really firing together so they start wiring together and weave those resources into the fabric of your brain and yourself. And in that little way, half a dozen times a day, you can defeat the negativity bias, you can level the playing field, and you can weave resources into yourself both to feel good and energize your full potential, both for yourself and to make this world a better place.
So if you're hearing this right now, I want you to hear the brilliance of what you're saying, Rick, and that is that the brain is wired for negativity. That's what makes it so difficult to be positive, because that is what brings you closest to survival. The brain, the sole job of nature, which is indifferent to your happiness as an individual. It's indifferent. It doesn't care either way. What it does care about is that the genes survive and that they do replicate and that life goes on. That's what they care about. Whether you're happy along the way, it's indifferent. When you recognize that that is the operating system of nature and that you're just part of that operating system, then, like you said, you can be conscious as an individual and say, you know what, brain, I'm going to savor this moment. This is a little thing in my day that I'm going to appreciate. I'm going to savor it. And as you consciously choose to savor those little moments, you start wiring and firing these things together. So you rewire your brain to be more appreciative and more happy than it would be if you just let nature run its course. And it's brilliant because you're changing the makeup of the brain to be happier and more appreciative.
Oh, it's totally true, and it's grounded in science. It's rooted in and it embodies a kindness to yourself. I've often been struck, I'm sure you have too, by how many people are nice to other people, but really mean or indifferent to themselves, And as they say in the airlines, put your own oxygen mask on first. It's out of taking care of ourselves and building up resources and achieving our own full potential over here that we become more able to help them over there.
We have to be in those resourceful, not only mental states, but emotional states. Otherwise, yeah, and being nice with somebody, we all know those people that have been nice, but they weren't really, like, we sense they were being nice because maybe they had to if they were going to get a tip or something.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is coming from that genuinely authentic, real place of feeling good about yourself, feeling good emotionally, feeling good about your mental space, so that when you go out into the world and you interact with others, you're just coming from a place of fullness. It's not forced. You're not doing it to get anything out of it. That's a more enjoyable place to be.
That's great. Exactly right. And as a lot of studies have shown, as people's own cup starts to runneth over, as it were, they're naturally inclined to be more patient, more able to turn the other cheek if it's appropriate. They're also more able to be strong, to speak truth to power, and they're also able to be strong without falling into, massive amounts of anger, cruelty, and whatnot.
Yeah,
I'll tell you a couple other things that really pop out for me, knowing more about how the brain has evolved. One is to appreciate that the original emotion was fear. Rule one in the wild is eat lunch today, don't be lunch today, So we've developed a real sensitivity to threats. and a tendency to have an ongoing kind of quiet background trickle of anxiety in us, such that we tend to presume that the world is always in a kind of threat level orange, when in fact it's really not. It's more like threat level chartreuse, a swimming pool of green with a pin drop of yellow.
It would depend if you asked George Bush.
That's why it's important to...
Terror warning level orange today.
Yeah. Well, the default setting of the brain is to feel scared, and then sure, there are a lot of times throughout history, and we're not immune to this, that groups will try to hold on to or gain political power by playing on fear, because we're very vulnerable to fear. Very vulnerable to fear.
And again, this is the predisposition of the mind. This is how we survive, because if we are in constant fear, we're in constant alert, we're aware of threats, we're going to be safer, although, it's not enjoyable. But again, nature is indifferent to your personal enjoyment as long as the genes survive and they replicate. So you're working with this and you're saying, okay, if the brain is predispositioned to be in fear mode and to be in threat mode, how do you, as an individual, recognizing this fact, work through that?
Exactly right. So, sure, it's important to see the real tigers in the bushes, and if I may be forgiven a political comment since you did bring up George Bush, if you're sitting in your ranch on vacation in August in 2011 and you get a briefing paper that says Obama, Al-Qaeda determined to attack the United States, including potentially by flying airplanes into office buildings, hello, that might be a real tiger to pay attention to. So, and on a smaller scale, of course, in our own lives, we have tigers to pay attention to, whether it's, not seeing the dentist often enough, or not exercising, or drinking too much, or you got a teenager who's growing marijuana in the attic, stuff like that. You got to be careful about it.
For some,
sure.
That might not be a bad thing. That might not be a thing.
Yeah.
It
well,
depends on what state you're in, I guess.
My point is that... on the other hand, we're biased toward, paper tiger paranoia. We're biased to overestimating threats, underestimating resources, and underestimating opportunities. All right? That's the default setting, and then it becomes the new normal. It's like the water we swim in, like the fish that doesn't know it's wet.
So
for me, the correction is to routinely challenge your personal sense of being threatened, routinely take in the good, like I talked about, of feeling stronger and safer. For example, noticing that you're all right now. Maybe you weren't okay in the past, maybe you won't be okay in the future, but right now you're actually all right. Okay? And also to really try to internalize a felt sense of being cared about. Because the social aspects of this, the interpersonal aspects of this, are critical. As we evolved, exile on the Serengeti was a death sentence. We really needed to feel included and loved and cared about. A lot of people don't have a strong sense of that. That's why, based on real things, not positive thinking or rose-colored glasses, based on real things, you want to internalize this sense of being cared about, because that's a very important basis for feeling good in general, but also in particular for dealing with this paper tiger paranoia and developing more of a sense of strength. So you're not so threatened. The last thing I'll say that's been a takeaway for me has been to be a lot more thoughtful about how I'm needlessly being a threat for other people. In other words, what little things am I doing in my tone, in the words I'm using, in my body language, in whatever, that make other people feel a little uneasy around me. I think of the Buddha saying, give no person cause to fear you. Give them cause to expect that, you're going to fire them if they don't come to work on time, or they aren't going to get their dessert if they don't do their homework or something like that. But, we don't need to, I've had a lot more compassion about this, I guess, just appreciating how scared people are and how much, through little things, without walking on eggshells, without being a doormat, we can kind of, relieve the fears of other people, which frankly is enlightened self-interest, because then they become a lot easier to work with, live with, sleep with, etc.
So true. I mean, I want to reiterate some of your main points before we wrap up today's show and then get your final thoughts. What I understand is that, people need to be aware that the brain has evolved in some really tumultuous times, and that we're predispositioned for survival. We're hardwired to value things that are safe and that are secure, and that one of the best mechanisms that we have to ensure our survival and safety is this pre-wiring for threats and caution. And with that, we are fighting against it to be happy. We are fighting against our own hard wiring to be happy, and the best way to be happy is to recognize that all that earlier wiring has gotten you to where you are. It allowed your genes to survive so that you are where you are today. And now, where times aren't as tumultuous, now it's time to say, how can I be more appreciative? How can I be happier in my current situation, knowing that I have this kind of old wiring still going on? And like you said, you can rewire it. You can, by just everyday little things, you can rewire it. So these are some key things to keep in mind. And then we go into about threats, having compassion for others and realizing that because they're all pre-wired that way, they're all pre-wired for little things to cause threats. Have compassion so that you're not intimidating when it's unnecessary. When you're not creating threats because it's unnecessary, you actually open the doorway for a free exchange of information and a way to connect on a higher level. Whereas I think so much of the conflict today is because one person's threatening another. You have billions of dollars going to defense budget spending because they're threatened, or they preemptively strike because they're threatened. And yes, we acknowledge the real tigers, like you said. We acknowledge the real threats, but we realize that in most cases, we're scared of our own shadows because we're pre-wired to do that. And once we recognize that, we can start living a fuller, and happier life.
Exactly right. Totally right. And to me, what's very helpful and happy about this is to have people appreciate that truly with basic skills. That's what I tried to write about. What are some good, effective, grounded in science skills or methods that are, specific, that go into the circuits, literally inside your own brain, and dial some up and dial some down. Dial down the ones that are stressed and emotionally reactive and frustrated and have heartache and feel lonely and rejected, etc. Dial those down, and dial up the circuits that have to do with feeling safer, calmer, more loved, and wiser, with more control of your attention, more mindfulness, and more inner strength, to deal with the real challenges in life.
I think the real key here is that you are in control of this brain mechanism. You, in whatever essence, in whatever you might want to call it, whether it's soul, whether it's higher awareness, whatever you want to call it, you're the observer to what's going on in this machine, and you're saying, I want to dial that down. I want to dial this up. But you are in control, and that's, I think, the biggest point. Yeah,
or at least you have a lot of influence over it. And in the beginning, you might still be, continue to being hijacked. I've been a therapist a long time. It takes a while to, it's like a lot of little things got us into a mess, right? It's going to be a lot of little things that gradually take us out. As you talked about, routine or regular practices will gradually take us out over time. But absolutely, people have so much more influence over their own minds and therefore their brains than usually they appreciate. They will spend so much time getting good at things that they say don't matter much, but will spend very little time or exert very little will or courage or heart in getting good at things that they say matter a lot, like being a better parent or a better mate or better at, dealing with their own emotional reactions and how they're, shooting themselves in the foot from time to time. So I think the sky's the limit. Talk about full potential. We're just beginning to appreciate really what the full potential is.
Well, and we can start with Buddha's Brain. Where can they go and get a copy of this book?
Oh, thanks. Anywhere, it's $12 on Amazon. That's a pretty good deal. My website's buddhisbrain.com. It's chock full of resources, ranging from talks and articles and PowerPoint PDFs I've done that people are very free to share with others as they like, plus lots of links to other good things that other people have done, in the general territory that I work in.
And that's buddhasbrain.com, buddhasbrain.com. Rick Hanson, thank you so much for being on today's Full Potential Show.
Great, thanks. Great being with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Well, that concludes this week's episode of the Full Potential Show, your #1 non-boring source for personal development. I'm James Rick, and if you want to get more positive programming for your brain absolutely free on a weekly basis, just visit fullpotential.com.
If you like the Full Potential Show, you're going to love the Full Potential Club. What would you like most as a Full Potential Club member? Be 2 to 3 times more productive? Do what you're passionate about? Have more energy? Reduce your work hours? Travel the world? Enjoy an amazing lifestyle on a frugal budget? What if you could do them all? James Rick has been there and done it in ways that few people have. For anyone serious about taking their life or business to the next level, you know you've got to do more than just watch. You've got to do. Join James Rick and other like-minded people for an incredible $10 a month at fullpotential.com/club. Be educated. Be empowered. Be the best version of you. fullpotential.com/club. Try it free for 30 days.